France is not just experiencing riots, it is undergoing a total systemic collapse. A perfect storm of soaring inflation, political paralysis, and deep-seated social anger has pushed the nation to a dangerous tipping point. But this crisis refuses to stay within its borders. As the European Union's second-largest economy teeters, the entire continent faces a domino effect, from financial market contagion and severed supply chains to the spread of political unrest. The protests are alarmingly organised, signalling a profound, lasting breakdown. This analysis cuts through the headlines to reveal the underlying forces that could redefine Europe's future. The stability of the continent now hangs in the balance. Subscribe for the full analysis to understand the crisis they're not showing you. France stands on the precipice. Its streets are theatres of protest, its public life is gripped by paralysis, and a profound anger has taken root. What we are witnessing is not merely another industrial dispute. This is a national crisis with ramifications that could redefine the political and economic contours of the entire European project. Our analysis tonight will cut through the noise to examine the structural forces at play. A deep-seated economic emergency, a collapsing political consensus, and a wave of social unrest, distinguished not by its chaos, but by its alarming degree of organisation. We will detail how shrinking public coffers, unsustainable debt, and contentious austerity measures have ignited a nationwide firestorm. You will see the evidence of a citizenry in revolt, hundreds of thousands of workers, pensioners, and students mobilising under the banner of the Block Everything movement. And critically, we will assess the stark warning from policy experts that instability in France does not stop at its borders. The nation's fate is inextricably linked to that of Europe. France is buckling under severe economic strain. Inflation continues its relentless climb, while wages remain stagnant. For countless families, the basics, rent, food, energy, are becoming untenable burdens. Public debt deepens, services erode, and trust in the system evaporates. Unemployment, officially at 7.7% in the last quarter, leaves 2.4 million citizens without work, a figure that haunts both struggling cities and a generation of young people facing a future of scarce opportunity. This is the pressure cooker. When the cost of living surges and incomes do not, when savings evaporate and stability becomes a memory, frustration curdles into rage. The growing chasm between economic reality and everyday survival is the fundamental spark for the unrest now sweeping the nation. For months, this tension has manifested in shuttered schools, halted trains, and strikes crippling airports and factories. The political class, meanwhile, appears fractured and ineffective, arguing behind closed doors, shifting policy without conviction, and presiding over a steady decay of public faith. Promises of change ring hollow, and citizens feel deliberately ignored. What begins as localised protest has hardened into sustained, organised confrontation. Demonstrations escalate into nightly clashes. The demand is no longer purely financial. It is a demand for dignity, for respect, for a functioning social contract. The fabric of communities is fraying, and a palpable tension now courses through the very heart of French society. This is not a temporary disturbance, it is a systemic crisis, and it is only deepening. The civil unrest in France has now reached a critical mass, transforming from isolated demonstrations into a nationwide movement. Major urban centres, Paris, Lyon, Marseille, Toulouse, are witnessing coordinated marches, where protesters blockade thoroughfares and bring public life to a standstill. This is not a sporadic event. It is a sustained campaign of industrial action and civil disobedience. Transport networks are paralysed. Schools and hospitals face severe disruption, and public services are buckling under the strain. The scenes from city squares have become grimly familiar. Barricades, tear gas, and frequent violent clashes between demonstrators and overstretched police forces. Crucially, this tension is not confined to the capital. It has spread decisively to smaller towns and regions, indicating a deep-seated national malaise. Politically, the crisis is exposing and deepening fundamental fractures. The government's controversial reform agenda, encompassing pensions, taxation, and labour laws, has acted as a catalyst, uniting a fragmented opposition and channeling public outrage into a potent political force. The resulting landscape is one of profound confusion. Local authorities are openly defying the national government. Official messaging is contradictory. And social media serves as an accelerant, amplifying every incident and grievance. This has evolved into a highly organised, protracted struggle. What began as spontaneous outrage has hardened into a disciplined series of rolling strikes and meticulously planned demonstrations. The disruption is no longer a news item. It is the daily reality for millions of French citizens, a constant reflection of a society demanding tangible answers and fundamental recognition. And this is where the domestic crisis assumes a continental dimension. France does not exist in isolation. Its economy is deeply enmeshed with those of its neighbours. Disruptions to its production and transport networks immediately threaten supply chains across the European single market. Financial markets are observing the instability with acute concern. Investor confidence is wavering, placing pressure on the euro and affecting banking and business sectors from Berlin to Madrid. Furthermore, sustained domestic turmoil could precipitate secondary effects, including shifts in migration patterns as citizens look beyond France's borders for stability and work. Politically, a weakened and distracted France creates a power vacuum at the heart of the European Union, complicating everything from trade negotiations to collective security policy. The ideological contagion is equally significant. The tactics and grievances resonating in French cities are being closely watched and increasingly mirrored by populist movements in Belgium, the Netherlands, and Spain. The crisis in France, therefore, is a test case for European stability. Its repercussions will be felt far beyond its own frontiers. The ramifications extend directly to Europe's critical infrastructure. France is a central artery for continental energy and transport. Its instability now threatens the flow of electricity and fuel across the continent. We are already observing the early effects: potential shortages in neighbouring regions, severe disruptions to tourism and international business, and a chilling effect on investment as companies and event organisers reconsider their commitments. This is the nature of a deeply integrated union. Every economic, political, and social connection transmits shock. France's unrest is not merely an internal affair. It is a stark warning signal to every European capital. The analysis from leading economists is unanimous. France is at a decisive tipping point. They identify a pressure cooker environment where soaring prices and stagnant wages are compressing public patience to its limit. Crucially, experts stress these protests are not transient disruptions, but symptoms of a profound systemic failure, a breakdown in the relationship between government policy and the lived experience of citizens. When a populace feels ignored, the analysts note unrest accelerates beyond all predictions. Financial specialists warn the cost of this instability carries a continental price tag. As one economist stated, investors see uncertainty and capital moves with extreme caution. This impacts the entire European project. Markets now react in real time to each clash and policy pronouncement from Paris. Social observers point to a generation of young people facing a future of scarce opportunity and unaffordable housing, a demographic that could drive long-term political change if this discontent persists. The consensus among strategists is clear. Political missteps now, ill-timed or poorly communicated reforms, act as accelerants. Governing requires a careful balance between necessary policy and maintaining public trust. The dominant fear is one of contagion. Economists warn of a domino effect, where shocks to trade, migration, and investment patterns reverberate through neighbouring states. Europe, they stress, cannot afford to be a bystander. The protests are noted for their high degree of coordination, a sign not of random chaos, but of a systematic, organised demand for change. Yet public sentiment remains dangerously volatile, where a single incident can trigger a massive response. In summary, France is grappling with a perfect storm: concurrent economic, political, and social pressures, each exacerbating the others. The outcome will define not only the Fifth Republic, but the wider European landscape. This is a crisis of societal fabric. From the shuttered factories and declining high streets to the pervasive anxiety among the young and the retired, the strain is universal. The unrest has metastasized from the grandes villes to provincial towns, making the restoration of order an ever more complex challenge. Europe's interdependence guarantees that a slowdown in French production, trade, and investment will ripple outward, potentially causing supply chain failures, market gyrations, and imported social tension in other member states. Consequently, political leaders across the continent are observing events with profound apprehension, aware that the ideological underpinnings of this anger could inspire similar movements elsewhere. Each statistic, each clash, each strike contributes to a portrait of a nation and, by extension, a union, struggling to reconcile economic imperatives with social cohesion. The streets of France are delivering a message. The continent must now decide how to respond. We must also consider the vital role of energy and transport. As a central hub for Europe's electricity and fuel distribution, any sustained disruption in France, through strikes or civil unrest, poses a direct threat to neighbouring nations. We could see slowed shipments, regional fuel shortages, and interrupted power supplies. The economic contagion extends to tourism and cross-border commerce. Hotels empty, airports quiet, and major investments are put on hold. This is the inherent risk of a single market. A crisis in one major economy creates a chain reaction across every connected sector. The consensus among economic analysts is that France has reached a critical juncture. They describe a pressure cooker environment fueled by inflation and wage stagnation. These are not fleeting protests, but a profound signal of systemic failure, a breakdown in the social contract. When the public perceives that its government is not listening, civil unrest can escalate with startling speed. The financial implications are continental. Instability in Paris triggers immediate market anxiety, affecting the euro and causing investors to pull back from European assets, impacting growth in Germany, Italy, and beyond. Furthermore, a generation of young people facing a future of limited jobs and unaffordable housing represents a potent force for long-term political change. Policy missteps now, seen as tone-deaf or imposed, risk pouring fuel on the fire. The challenge for any government is to enact necessary reforms while maintaining a bedrock of public trust. The overarching concern is the domino effect. France's problems can swiftly become Europe's problems through disrupted trade, shifting migration patterns, and eroded investor confidence. The protests are highly organised, indicating deep-seated, structured opposition rather than mere chaos. Yet the public mood remains dangerously volatile. In essence, France confronts a convergence of crises, economic, political, and social. The resolution will shape the future of the European project itself. This is a national emergency with continental stakes.